So just a quick, before we get over to your piece, Mike, just a quick intro. So I know you've been around a few different international schools.
Yeah,
Do you want to share where your travels have taken you?
sure. A bit of a pathway over 26 years. So between Mexico, Russia, Qatar, Singapore, Germany, and Guatemala. So if I ran into anybody along that path, we've come full circle back to Singapore again. So it's nice to see some familiar faces on this call. I know some of you from different places, and James and Dan and Bogdan, thanks very much for inviting me to share a little bit and learn a little bit.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mike. Really appreciate you joining. Want to underline that. I know you're very, very busy because you are now, of course, the CEO of St. Joseph's Institution International in Singapore. So you have a lot going on. So, very appreciative that you could spare some time today.
Sure. Thanks very much. And I'm absolutely happy to share and spend time. James and Dan and Bogdan and the crew at SJII have been such an essential partner for us in the work that we're doing. I'm also lucky enough to have people on my crew like Claire and Simon who are on this call who, if people ask you, what do you need to make these kind of significant changes and transformations, you need people like that. And that's how it happens. So you've got your external partnerships, you got your people in within your organization. And what I hope to share today, I hope is helpful, but this is for you. So stop me anytime and ask any questions. Could I start by asking, just put into the chat what role you hold? So my role is CEO, but in a lot of your schools, that would be director, superintendent, head of school, depending on the nationality of the school and the construct. But what's your role for the 50 people on this call? What role do you hold? Just throw that into the chat so I can have a little context before I dig in here, so I can make sure that it is targeted the best it can be. So it doesn't have to be the official title of your role, but it can be what you try and accomplish. It could be your title if that explains it. But in the end of the day, yeah, lots of directors of technology, tech coaches, yeah, lots of directors, head of IT managers. All right, great. That gives me a great idea of who is in the call. So if you could just, let's see, give me a little thumbs up there if you can see the AI rollout slide. Are we good on that?
We got that, Mike. Thank you.
Okay, super. So I'm going to upfront describe a couple of things, and I hope this is helpful in the jobs that you hold, because whether you're a tech coach or whether you're a director of IT or whatever role you are in technology, you are constantly being asked to change people's habits. And it's your job. You're basically being asked to change what people have done before and do something new. And so I have not seen a pace of change like this since the rollout in the early 2000s of collaborative software from Google. So when we first had Google Docs, Google Presentations, Google Sheets, and that kind of thing, and transferring at that time between sending Word attachments between each other and being on version 19, or not sure whether we were on version 16 or 20 or whatever it was. It was such a waste of time to try and catch up on those email threads. So these two very significant moments, I want to talk a little bit about it, and I'm going to go micro to macro and then back down again. Because for us, when Claire had the opportunity to speak at one of the events that James was talking about in preparing for an AI-driven future, this partnership with Google and with SJII and really focusing on Gemini has been a game changer for us. And I can say that when you go to the top level of what we're trying to do, we're trying to change landscapes of work, right, for teaching and learning. And as we move towards innovation, adaptability, digital literacy, there is no way to escape what's happening in AI. And I don't have to tell this group that that's the case, but that may not be the belief of everybody in your organization. So I guess my ultimate question to this group is, well, whose job is it to convince people that there's nowhere to run or hide on AI here? So is it your job? Is it the director's job? Is it the coach's job? Is it, whose job is it? So our strategic impact and how we frame it is integrating cutting edge tools and approaches to enhance learning, streamline operations, and prepare students for a future driven by digital innovation. Now, notice it's very deliberate in the way that we word that we have the word operations in there. And I can say probably the biggest challenge that we've had, and I think Claire and Simon can echo this challenge, that we really, if we don't do this with operations and teaching and learning and do it, beside each other, we're going to run into some problems. And so we're already running into some problems where we're finding, whether it's in operations or teaching and learning, when you get people who will not adopt, well, what do you do with that? Because we have a rollout plan, as you can see here. We've got, you do your pilots, and we had Gemini introduced to a limited group. The nice thing was that group, we made sure they were vocal. So then we had another cascading group who said, hey, where's my Gemini? Which is what you want. We didn't just trial Gemini. And that cascading group said, hey, listen, how come they got to pilot it? And then we made sure that by the end of that pilot, that the people who were in it were using it in such ways. And James and Dan and Bogdan were so great in this journey to make sure by the end of that pilot that people were going to say, please don't take this away. And I could see the smile on Dan and James' face. If you remember when the pilot ended, people freaked out in between when the pilot ended and when we actually rolled it out. And actually, hindsight, I would have closed that gap even tighter to make sure that users and those people would have been.
I think we just.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mike, we just lost your signal there for a second. I think you're back now. All good. Yes.
Okay. No, I was just saying I would have suggested that I would have planned more accordingly to not have that gap between that pilot group and when it rolls out to everybody, because those super users got very anxious, which is what we wanted. We wanted them to have it, and we wanted them to want to have it. So, so when we launched All Staff, we made the decision to go across the board, operations and teaching and learning. And there certainly were a lot of people in our organization, not a lot, but a significant enough group who said, wait, why do I have this? What's the point? And then we start targeting operational PD and support and just drip feeding it there, and teaching and learning. And then we do this ongoing training and evaluation. And then we do the controlled student introduction with 13 plus, and away we go. And so we do have a plan, and I'm happy to share that if it's helpful with anybody on this call. But the key for us is go way back out to the macro in terms of the vision, mission, and values. Because for us, why would we use AI in the first place? Well, our school exists to try and make a better world. That's why we exist. Learn, inspire, serve, right? We learn, right? And we inspire, and we serve. And we serve others, and we serve planet, and we try and make a better future. And so everything that we try and do with AI, we come back to the highest level of what we're trying to do. So when you go to the next level of how we're articulated in our strategic impact, you can see that we have 4 impacts. And in our 4 impacts there, the embracing technology and innovation is a perfect place for the AI strategy to sit. AI is not the only thing that sits in innovation and technology, but it is a major focus. And it's also important to say, I know for technology leaders, there's always so many things you could be focusing on. So it's a question of what rises to the top, and then what help you need from your director or CEO to help make sure that that stays at the top in terms of what we are doing. A good example for us is anytime now that we get together with a senior leadership retreat or a manager's retreat, or anytime we're pushing things forward, all school, we're very deliberate in terms of which impact that we are working towards. And as James said, they were just in Singapore with us at Google. We made sure we were offsite at Google headquarters with our 60 managers, and Claire and Simon did an impeccable job working with the Google team and James and team to put on an experience which is taking our managers to the next level, because it can't always come from the CEO, and it can't always come from the director of ICT, and it can't always come from those people that you would expect it from. So as we moved, the only other thing I'd like to share today is in your roles that you have, and we're working very hard in our organization for people to understand change, because it's not about AI, or it's not specifically about new assessment techniques, or it's not specifically about, I mean, pick one of the 100 things that you'd like to change within the school system. It's not about any one of those specific changes. And I do find that oftentimes, especially at middle management and below, nobody's ever had opportunity to talk about change in general and how change works. And so then you try and roll something out like Gemini and you run into barriers because they think it's being done to them rather than change is inevitable. It's absolutely inevitable. So I've been sharing, and I just plucked a couple of slides from a variety of different sessions that I've had between all school sessions, manager sessions, senior leadership sessions, and recurring coming back to the same change. So this was one of the slides that I showed at an all school. So we got all, 400 of us together, all 400 adults in the same place, and just to talk about change. And if I had have just talked about AI, people would have come away with a different understanding of what the focus is. But because we talked about change and then use AI as an example, it's turned into a different conversation. So we started with this tractor. And so what I shared with people is, if you want to really understand how the adoption of innovation works, go to the godfather of adoption of innovation, Everett Rogers. So if you've never read any Everett Rogers, do yourself a favor. He wrote the first book in the 1950s, and he's written a book every decade about the adoption of innovation. And the first thing that he studied, and he was astounded as to why farmers in the United States would not adopt. Why would they not leave their horse? Same for you in your job every single day as you look at what Gemini will do for you, for example, in streamlining some of your Gmail, or for me, Notebook LM in taking the raging river of articles that come at me as a head of school and plucking the right ones out and then synthesizing and listening to it at an audio level and then asking it questions at a Notebook LM level. Why wouldn't I do that? But human beings are funny that way, and they don't do it. So he studied why human beings would not get rid of their horse and adopt the tractor. And so when you look at his adoption curve, this is the adoption of innovation curve. And so where your school is with AI, and you can put anything on this adoption curve, are you at the takeoff point? Are you just introducing it? Is it saturated? When it is saturated, it's just part of the culture. It's just what you do. And then unfortunately in schools, and especially when it comes to some of the tech innovations, there's a lot of that we see on the unsuccessful line, that you get a good start in it, but you don't get the mainstream adopting it, doesn't become embedded, and it just tails off. And there goes another shiny thing that somebody attempted to adopt, that they brought back from a conference that they saw that they loved when they were in Bangkok, and came back to Singapore and tried to adopt it. So I don't think we actually support our teams enough to understand how this works in order to be successful in what they're doing, because innovation is not technology, right? Technology can be an example of innovation. Innovation is just you're introducing something into a system where it doesn't currently exist. It doesn't mean it's new. So if your school doesn't do recycling, but you want to adopt recycling, that's innovation. Recycling is not new in any way, but it's new to your system. Therefore, it's an innovation. Therefore, it follows the same theory. So then I back it up with examples like Noster, Villa, and 1000. And I'll say to tech coaches, and I'll say to middle level leaders and even senior leaders, and say, listen, if you can't say that you've got the vision, skills, incentives, resources, and action plan in line for whatever it is that you are trying to implement, have you ever run into any of these emotions or reactions? Have you had people confused? It's like, why are we doing this? Well, I don't know, because there's no vision. There's no why. Why did we all get Gemini? People don't understand why we all got Gemini as adults at SJII International. They're confused. Or if you take an example of they don't have the skills. If they don't have the skills in column 2 there, it's anxiety. And I know you ICT professionals see this all the time. The anxiety comes from not having the skills to do it. And they'll sit in a PD session and they'll watch somebody beside them go, oh, watch this, ooh, with vids, and here we go, and we're doing this. And the person just sitting there going, I don't know how to do that, so I'm out. And they check out. And it gives them major anxiety. And your resistors are the ones that see no incentive as to why they should do it. So I love working with leaders and senior leaders and coaches to actually understand how change works. And so for us, Gemini and the AI is an example of adoption of innovation, but we're actually taking the time to talk about the adoption of innovation across the board, no matter what it is. So when you look at the Gilman equation, for example, and you look at those resistors where you're thinking, wait, why is it that they will not adopt that? Well, it's quite simple. When you look at Gilman's equation, the perceived value of the new idea minus the perceived value of the old way of doing it must be greater than the perceived cost of the change. And there are charts and planning and strategy documents that you can use for these equations in Nosterville and 1000 and Everett Rogers. But I really do think as a leader in these organizations, we don't spend enough time with people who are asking to implement change to understand change. And so for us in our Gemini journey, it's been fascinating because we've tried to break it down for people to say, hey, listen, you know when that update comes on your computer or your phone, how many times do you hit not now? Why is that? And let's talk about the human nature of that change. And then from there, we start to talk about, well, there's change in your daily routine, and then there's long-term change. And the difference as you roll these types of things out can be very different. So for example, we have facial recognition at the school now as a daily routine change, but it comes with, in terms of how you need to implement it and how you do it, you have to be very deliberate, right? Same with Gemini, that's a daily routine change, right? Linked with your whole G Suite, including Gmail. And then there's the long-term changes where it's like, oh, we have to look at our LMS and our SIS and look at that kind of thing. Okay, we got to explore that over months, and then we got to see what's best. Then we have an implementation plan, but it doesn't matter. When you look at all of those things, they are the same. They follow the same adoption curves. They follow the same theory of change. And in the end of the day, what we are really hoping to do is to leverage, the power of Gemini and the power of AI to really have that be a gateway to digital transformation for our organization. Because whether it's HR or assessment models or personalized learning or whatever it might be, that digital transformation is the goal, because we want to improve learning for everybody, not just the kids. We want to improve for the kids, we want to improve it for the adults, and this strategically is how we believe we go from here to here to here to here.